What's up guys, Fire here, and today I'll be doing a rundown of patch 4.3. I'm going to be going over what's changed and then after that breaking it down and telling you what impact the changes are actually going to have. Now, two things very quickly. I'm moving house this weekend and that's why I haven't uploaded as much. Now the second thing is that I'm going to have good enough internet to stream now, so if you want to come and hang out with me then follow my Twitch or Twitter or even Facebook just to know when I'm going to be going live. So then, for a rundown, this patch includes buffs to Corki's damage, Ryze's range and Skarner's slow, and then nerfs to Gragas, Kassadin, Kha'Zix and Teemo's damage and Yasuo's shield. There have also been small tweaks to the support items, jungle items, Moby Boots and Ruby Crystal, and finally we have a buff for the tier and also a Doran shield nerf. Right, so let's jump right into the patch 4.3 breakdown part then. So I'm going to go through, I've got the patch notes in front of me, I'm going to go through them and I'm going to tell you what kind of impact I think these changes are actually going to have and kind of explain them a little bit too. So the first change is going to be to Corki. Now Corki's actually been one of my favourite ADs for a long time, but right now his Q is kind of like a Pokemon ability. Every time I see that and I use it, I think of someone using Splash or Bubble in Pokemon and it just ruins the champion for me. But unfortunately this looks like they're not going to revert the change, they're just going to tweak it a little bit. Now this change is kind of good in a way. Obviously his Q and his R do magic damage, so they're not affected by things like armor penetration, and that's always been one of Corki's kind of problems, is that you build AD on him like a normal AD, but his abilities don't scale with it. So you build AD but the abilities don't do more damage, and that kind of he struggles really late game with that kind of theory. Now this is actually pretty good because you get the 0.5 bonus attack damage ratio. Now 0.5 is not a bad ratio for AD either. And what I think this is actually going to mean is that you can rush a Bloodthirster on Corki in lane and then get the Triforce afterwards, and your Q is still going to do a lot of damage. The reason I think this is actually pretty cool is because Corki's got quite short range, and it means that if you lifesteal is really good on him because you can harass him very easy, you can force him out of lane. With a Bloodthirster, you pretty much cannot force someone out of lane because they're just going to lifesteal back up. It gives you extra trade damage on your just auto attacks. It also makes your passive do a little bit more because it's doing a percentage of your AD. And it's just overall, I think this is a good change, but I don't think it's enough to bring him back into competitive play, though I will be trying him out with the Bloodthirster and Triforce route. Now the Gragas' change here is needed on his E. His E is way too good a trading tool in lane, especially early. You can just dive onto someone level 1 with your E and actually probably do a lot of damage because of the AD ratio on it. Now this is kind of what it's saying to me, is that if you want to do damage with your E, you need to max it second. A lot of Gragas players right now will max Q and then W for the damage reduction because there's no real reason to max their E second. In this case, it's actually going to be better to max your E second in some cases where you want to do upfront damage to someone. So it's a good change. It's just aimed at making the choice for Gragas. Either he wants the damage reduction with his W or he wants to do more damage with his E. I don't believe this R change to his cask is actually anything important because I believe this was changed in 4.2 and just not brought forward. Okay, so big one, Kassadin nerfs. Do I think this is enough to make him stop being 100% banned? No, I honestly don't. I think he's still going to be banned because you can see these numbers here. If we look at the Force Pulse, at max rank, you're going to be taking that down by 40 damage. 40 damage is actually a reasonable amount, but they're not really touching his ratios. They're only touching his base damage. So it means that still if you get snowballed early and you buy items, you're still going to be doing a lot of damage. The big thing to note here, though, is his silence. So at max rank, it's only 2 seconds now instead of 2.5. That 0.5 second is actually quite a big deal, and it's one of the reasons why it's so hard to deal with Kassadin, because he jumps on you, he silences you, and then it's very difficult for you to react before he can just jump out again. Now with the silence at level 1 as well, it's also important. It's hard to now gank for Kassadin because he doesn't really bring much to the fight. Before, he could just silence them and make it very difficult for them to flash, but only a second silence is a little bit better. So yes, he's easier to lane against, I think, now, and I don't think he's going to punish you as soon, but I still think that if he gets snowballed like most Kassadins do, then that's when you're going to have a massive problem like before. So I still think he's going to be banned. Now moving on to Kha'Zix. These Kha'Zix changes I like, but the problem is that I don't think this is enough. So he's moving the missing health damage down to 6% and the maximum damage versus monsters down to 100. Now the 100 here is aimed at punishing jungle Kha'Zix because jungle Kha'Zix is very strong. In lane it's easy to punish Kha'Zix, but in the jungle you can't really punish him or shut him down, and that's one of the biggest problems and why he's so popular right now as a jungler, because he will get those items to make him good. He's a good ganker, he's a good dueler, so this is aimed at kind of shutting him down and reducing his dragon pressure as well. Now his leap, the bonus attack damage ratio down to 0.2, I think that's a fair change, especially considering that pros were evolving this first because they put a lot of importance on jumping onto the person in a gank. I think this doing less damage is going to make it a little bit fairer. Remember that the Q damage is only for the Involved and Rage claws, and a lot of pros were not evolving that first anyway because they want the E jump, so it's not really a bigger hit to Kha'Zix as it does seem if you're just reading this. Now the Void Assault, I actually do like the ignore the unit collision. It's not going to make a huge deal, but it does make it a little bit better. And this R change is something that I've always think should have been in the game, and I'm surprised it wasn't there to start with, in that when you evolve your R, it should obviously do the reduced damage and you get the extra stealth use, but it should increase the duration of the stealth as well. So I think this is always a change that's pretty good and gives you longer to use those 3 charges. That was my phone. I don't know if you heard that. Awkward. Okay, Ryze. Now, I don't think this is enough. Right now, I do want to talk about Ryze a little bit because Ryze is in a funny place. I think he's still pretty strong, but the problem is that every mid laner right now outpokes him. They have longer range, they outpush him, so they push him into turret, and then Ryze is useless under turret. You'll get poked, you'll get forced out of lane, you'll miss the CS anyway because you can't just last hit with your Q because you'll run out of mana. Now, someone did talk to me about a change before mentioning it. I'm not sure if it's in a PBE note somewhere, that if his Q gave you mana back when you last hit with it, like Gangplank's Q, then that would solve a lot of Ryze's problems. I think if they introduced that into these changes as well with the base health, meaning you can get a little bit more aggressive in lane and the Q overload will make it easier to harass to get into kill range. I think if they put the mana back on his Q, then we'd actually see Ryze come back, at least in solo queue, if not competitive. Now the Skarner change, without being rude, I don't think this is going to have any impact because mana cost of Crystal Sash was a big deal because he was going out of mana, and that's nice and everything, but he just doesn't have the damage. He's got an improved Fracture, which is a slow, so it means he can attack people more, but again, he just doesn't do any damage. So you play him, you slow someone, you can catch them and you can do damage to them, but you just tickle them. So this doesn't really solve him in the current situation. This is a really good change for Teemo, well, not for Teemo, but playing against Teemo. The 0.5 is still a reasonable amount. It's not really so much. The problem is it's not actually as big a nerf as it seems, because a lot of Teemo players will build Liandry's, they'll build Void Staff, they'll build, so that's like double penetration, right? And then the Morellonomicon as well, which is CDR, so you get more traps out. Now, when you combine all this, they don't really have a ton of AP on those items. It's not like Teemo's stack Deathcap and high AP items. They stack penetration and they stack burns after, because then the trap does even more damage over time. So this isn't a bigger nerf as people seem to think it is. It's still going to obviously make it a little bit better because vision is very difficult to cut these traps out right now, because they're obviously, everyone has to get sweepers, and even then it might not be enough to clear the whole minefield that Teemo's put. But I do think this is a good start. Okay, so Yasuo, now he's pretty much pick or ban as well at the moment, especially alongside Castim. One of the big reasons is his passive, which is a shield, and Riot have gone some way to addressing this, but I don't think this is going to be enough to make him not banned anymore, and I'll explain why in a second. Now the duration is down from half a second to 1.5. Nice change, but I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. The shield real values is something that is good because it's like an extra 220 less damage at level 18, and that's a reasonable, that's quite a big margin really. 220 is quite a big takedown from before, but it's only affecting him really at the later levels. It's not really affecting his early levels, which is where he gets a lot of use out of it in lane. So it's actually not that big a change because it only starts to have a big impact if you see we're taking 5 off at level 5. At level 5, you're still in lane, but that 5 damage is not going to make that much of a difference. Now the thing with Yasuo, and the reason he's picked or banned a lot at the moment, is because he needs 2 items, Infinity Edge and a Shiv. And once he gets those 2 items, he can kill anyone. You think that is the problem with him right now. You only need 2 items and you start wrecking people. If you punish him in lane, you can kill him, you can shut him down. You've proven it with people like Kayle. Even Ziggs is okay against him, not great. Syndra's good against Yasuo, but the problem is, you shut him down in lane, he eventually farms, he eventually gets those 2 items, and then he eventually just kills the rest of your team. So that's the problem with him. I don't think it's going to have that much impact in the overall scheme of things. Okay, so there's been changes to fears, and basically from what I've gathered from this, is that they now run away from the target that's feared them. So if you Fiddlesticks fear, instead of running towards Fiddlesticks, they always run away. The drain change isn't too huge because the tether remains at 750, so it means that even if someone runs away from you, obviously you have to be closer to use it in the first place, but when someone runs away, they've actually increased the range, so it's even better. Holy crap, how did I miss that? So they've increased the range and the tether still remains the same. What I would say to Fiddlesticks players is don't necessarily use it at max range, because if you go closer to them and then they run away, obviously you get the full drain off. If you're at 575 and then you use a drain at max range, they don't have to run that far to break the tether. Okay, so let's just have a quick look. These are all like effects changes, so I'm not really going to go into this, but the only thing here is that Zac's passive. Now you can stomp on his blobs from like a greater radius, so it's easier to play against him, which is a bit strange. Let's go on to item changes very quickly. I know this is a long video, so I'm going to go over these quite quickly. Now, Tear of the Goddess, they've given it a buff because the people that use this, people like Jace, Nidalee especially, they used to use this and it was so effective because their ultimate granted them a stack of the tier. Now that their ultimate doesn't grant the stack, they've kind of fallen out of favour. So this change that grants an extra maximum mana per 8 seconds means that even though the mana regen has gone down, I actually think it's a buff. Doran's Shield, this is a huge change. This is probably going to mean that in top lane, and it might not happen, I might be wrong, but I think personally that most people are going to start Cloth 5 now, because 5 potions is ridiculously good, and a lot of the champions right now are they tickle each other until they get enough of an advantage. Now before, the Doran's Shield give the health regen and the health, so the tickling never really add up to anything, but now if you build a Doran's Shield, I think the tickling would add up to something, so you need the potions from Cloth, and Cloth is going to give you the armor to not really take much damage in the first place. Spirit Stone items. This is quite a big change, but it's also a buff to some people. So it's a nerf to some and a buff to others. It's a nerf because the passive that you get back, the health and mana, is reduced. But now it's no longer hard for area of effect spells. This means people that are actually AoE clearers. As an example, like Fiddlesticks could maybe come into this category. Sejuani could come into this category. Even like Lee Sin's E and stuff like that. It means you're actually going to get way more of a percentage. You're going to get more health and mana back from AoE spells than you were before. Because if you look at it, before it halved, so the 8% would have been 4 and the 4% would have been 2. Now it's 6 and 3. So if you're an AoE clear jungler, you're actually getting a buff out of this. Boost of mobility, 200 gold less, but they've reduced the 20 speed in combat. It's not really that huge a deal, I don't feel, because I think in combat they shouldn't work anyway, and the out of combat movement speed is staying the same. So it's just an adjustment, and we'll see how it actually plays out, but I don't think it's going to have that much effect. But it will mean that people who want to rush this can get it a little bit earlier into the game. Now, Ruby Crystal, they're reducing the health and reducing the gold. This isn't a very big change. I don't expect to see people start Ruby Crystal because you'd only pick up 1 or 2 potions, with it. So possibly, yeah, you could pick it up, but I don't think it's actually going to be worth it. Maybe for a support now that you don't get a Doran's Shield, you could start Ruby Crystal, especially if you're someone like Leona. Sightstone and Ruby Sightstone obviously had their gold reduced. Now, very quickly, the support items. So basically, Spell Thief's Edge is now getting tweaked. I'm not going to go through all the changes because you can see they're quite in depth here. But what I will say is it's now more risky. So this is your high risk, high reward. If you manage to pull this Frost Queen off, if you manage to get it up to this Frost Queen's claim and you get a couple of kills out of it, it's actually going to be really good for you. But if you don't get the kills, you don't get control of the lane, and you get behind, that item is absolutely crap. So if you get behind, do not buy that item because you will stay behind and you'll get no gold from it. Now, Relic Shield is built for tanks. It's always been a little bit odd because it's not a very tanky item, but they kind of buffed the health now. They've taken the health regen out, which is fine because As a support, buy some freaking health potions. You don't need like health regen on an item. A support, in my opinion, should trade. They heal it back up with a health potion if they need to. But the people that should have this relic shield should be the all-in fighters. Maybe Thresh, probably not. Leona and Alistar are very all or nothing. They dive in, they go for the trade, and they try and kill someone. So that's that. An Ancient Coin has removed the health regen. So you can see a theme here. They're trying to knock down the health regen from items, but it does give you some mana regen, even though they're reducing that. The first one gives you mana regen, sorry, and then they're reducing it from then. This is a good change, I think, because everyone was just getting coin. Now you have to make the decision of, do I get the coin for the end game passive? This grants nearby allies plus 40% movement speed. That is why you should be buying this item, not the other stuff. The 20% CDR is very good, but you should be buying it for the CDR and for the movement speed active. You shouldn't be buying it because it's the best gold regeneration or gold generation item in the game. So I think this change is actually pretty good. So that wraps up my 4.3 patch rundown and breakdown. I'm sorry this is a long video. Holy crap, I meant this to be like 10 minutes, maybe less, and I just kept talking. So I apologize if you stayed till the end. Thank you very much. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video.